Awesome. Hey everyone, this is Homegrown Big coming at you with an exclusive interview with the amazing and illustrious Kyndra Mueller. Is that how you say your last name? Mueller? Mueller.
Yeah.
Okay. So Kyndra and I have known each other on the social media circuits for quite a long time, since 2011, I'd say.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
2011.
Yeah.
So that's 8 years. And we have had similar journeys in our health and fitness, and also disparate journeys in our health and fitness. But we've always been comparing notes and checking back in over time and space, which has been really helpful and interesting to see. So I think Kyndra has a really interesting story, and we're just going to jump right into it. So Kyndra, just a little bit of background. What led you up to starting veganism, briefly?
So let's see. So I was raised in a family that ate meat, and when I was 12 years old, I decided I was going to go vegetarian. So vegetarian up until like university, and then at that point some of my social circle was vegan, and just kind of being around them, it was something that I eventually considered making the leap from vegetarian to veganism. So I did that, and I think, I started off kind of doing like the junk food vegan thing that a lot of people do, just being like, it's vegan, so it's healthy, it doesn't matter what else is in it.
Right.
And that worked for me for a while. I was not athletic. I was not active at the time. Wasn't paying a ton of attention to my health. But after a certain point, maintaining veganism, I became active. I started running. Gradually worked up to like running marathons and ultra marathons, and got into triathlons. So a lot of endurance sports. And so at that point, I started hearing about this raw veganism thing, mainly like high carb, low fat. And sort of the premise was that you could achieve extraordinary athletic ability and performance by just like eating, 20 bananas a day or whatever it was. And I really, really wanted to improve my performance. So I decided to give it a shot. And I feel like initially I had a boost, and it seemed to work well for a while in the sense that I felt good. But my main complaint was that I was gaining a ton of weight, which just...
So let me interrupt you real quick. When did you start veganism, like timeline-wise? And then when did that move and transition into raw veganism?
So I would have switched to veganism when I was probably, say, about 19 or 20.
Okay.
And then maintained veganism through until I was about, I would say 29 or 30. Yeah, about 30. Yeah. And then at that point, I was getting a little more serious about running and endurance sports and my health and all that. And so I started kind of dipping my toes in the water there with raw veganism.
So how long were you running as a vegan before you moved into raw veganism?
I would say, so I've been running like road marathons and stuff for probably, I think, 2 or 3 years. And then at that point, I moved on to like ultras and trail running and that stuff. And that was, I think that was only about a year of that before I moved into raw veganism. So not a long time.
Yeah. And when you were on veganism before then, were you eating fortified foods? Because you said you were eating just kind of like a regular vegan diet. Were you eating pre-made vegan foods, fortified vegan foods, fortified nut milks, or things like this?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, I definitely did like the vegan cheese and the vegan meat thing for a long period of time, eating a lot of like processed vegan foods. And then kind of transitioned out of that as I developed what I'm pretty sure was a sensitivity to soy because I was over consuming it. So I'd kind of moved away from that and moved towards like a whole food more approach to the vegan diet. So, a lot of grains, a lot of produce, stuff like that. Not a ton of soy or, I wasn't consuming a ton of nut milks or stuff at that point.
Were you supplementing at that time?
I believe I was supplementing B12 and iron at that time.
B12 and iron. And that's pretty much it. Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your journey into raw veganism and 30 bananas a day in that era, because I think that's where we met up. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't remember how I stumbled upon this whole community, but it was definitely from the 30 Bad website, and seeing this guy, Durian Rider, who was supposedly just achieving these incredible endurance athletic feats just by eating predominantly fruit. And, this was sold as being a diet and a lifestyle that was just going to give you peak performance. You'd be healthy, you'd be happy, like everything in your life would line up if you followed this diet. Everything in your health would line up. It would, it would turn your gray hair like beautiful shades of red or something, and it would solve every problem under the sun, basically.
Yeah.
And so, and in terms of health, I fell for that like hook, line, and sinker. I thought, well, this appears to be working for these people who are very vocal about the benefits that it is giving them. So I'm going to give it a shot. And yeah, like I said, initially I felt like, I felt happy. I felt good on it. I felt like it was working to the extent that like physically I felt good. But as I said, I started gaining a lot of weight very quickly. And I know I was not the only female in that community who was having that concern. However, that all seems to be brushed aside.
How long had you been doing that before you started noticing the weight gain?
It was probably like a month in or something like that. And it was, it wasn't like it all just piled on very quickly. It was a very gradual thing. But it got to the point that like, I vividly remember this during training for triathlon, when at one point I stepped on the scale and the scale read 200 pounds. And I said, I'm not weighing myself anymore, because, I was so alarmed by that. And I just saw myself getting fatter and fatter. And this wasn't muscle. This wasn't water weight. Like, this was fat.
Yeah.
And it was just so alarming, and it was so contradictory to what was being sold about this diet helping you achieve optimal leanness and optimal performance. And it was just like, it was sold to me as, this is your body recovering from restrictive eating, recovering from an eating disorder past. And this is the way it works. Like, you put on all this weight and then it's going to magically just melt off your body.
Right.
Once your body has recovered, once the metabolic damage has been healed, all this weight is going to melt off your body, and you're going to be like 120 pounds with a six-pack.
Yeah. And at 200 pounds, how much had you gained since coming into raw veganism?
Like probably a solid 50 pounds.
Yeah.
It's probably in the 150 range when I started.
Yeah. Because you and I are kind of similar
I wasn't super
height.
lean at that point, but yeah, it was a lot of weight.
Yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't just a little bit. It was
a lot. It was substantial. Yeah. And it was like, I remember people in my life at that time just being like, what is going on with you? Like, how can you be training for an Ironman and putting on 50 pounds of weight? Like, what is going on? Like, if anything, you should be leaning out when you're training for an endurance sport or something like that. But here I was getting fatter and fatter. And as that weight came on, obviously I noticed my athletic performance declining. Suddenly I couldn't run hills anymore. Being on the bike felt a lot harder. I just felt like winded climbing upstairs. I was not feeling like I was in position, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was your daily caloric intake and your, an example of a typical day? Was it?
So I was very much following this guidance of, you need to be eating 3,000 calories a day, no matter what you are doing, no matter what your athletic endeavors entail. You need to be eating 3,000 calories minimum, or your body's going to go into like starvation mode and this and that. So I was tracking everything I was eating in Chronometer. I was definitely eating 3,000 calories a day, sometimes more. You know, if I was having a heavy training day, I could have been eating like 7,000 calories. And a lot of that was like the banana shakes, the Datorade, so dates blended up with water and coconut milk. It was all fruit. I would have maybe some salad or something for dinner, but it was predominantly fruit. There was nothing else in there.
Mm.
So, a lot of sugar.
And so you were low fat.
I was, yeah.
Yep. So did you follow raw hygiene? Did you like stay away from salt? Did you use a lot of spices, or did you stay away from that? Did you?
So, like initially I cut salt out of my diet completely, but I found that it wasn't working for me in terms of like endurance activities. So I kept that up for a while, but eventually I was just like, I'm having cravings, like I'm having problems with feeling dizzy, like heart palpitations, stuff like that. So I did add salt back in. Mm-hmm. And of course the whole response to that on the website was like, oh, you've added salt back in. You're not doing it right. This is why you've gained all this weight. Just add it salt because you're eating salt.
You just gained 25 pounds because of salt.
Exactly. Yeah.
And probably you were sneaking in 10 avocados a day at least, right? That's the other thing they like to say.
Exactly.
Just fess up. How many avocados did you eat today? More than a quarter of an avocado?
Exactly. And so initially, I was doing the super low fat thing, like, less than 10% of my calories from fat. And, as I started feeling worse and worse and having these cravings and this preoccupation with food that just would not go away, I decided to start adding in more fat. So I would have like half an avocado or an avocado with my salad every night, just hoping that I would feel more sated and more satisfied by that. Because I also did have the issue of my period disappearing while I was on this diet, doing the low fat thing. So my hormones were like completely out of whack. And adding in this fat didn't fix it either.
Yeah.
So lots of stuff going on.
Lots of stuff going on. And failing performance along with it. How was your, we talked about this, and I think it's an important thing for people to consider because we're not just all hobbyists living in, Thailand, not working jobs and, on permanent vacation. So
that's not to work for a living.
yeah. How was your work during that time?
So, I just found that I was getting brain fog and fatigue that was getting worse and worse. And it was just like, I would have days where I would be sitting at my computer at work, like I'm an engineer, and I'd be sitting there just staring at the screen, just like unable to concentrate and just feeling like just exhausted. And I couldn't do the work. And my performance at work was just like obviously suffering. And it was just, I felt like I wasn't even able to do the bare minimum. It was bad. And it was not a great place to be in my career as an engineer, somebody who depends on being able to think critically and do problem solving and all that sort of stuff.
And probably quickly at times as well. Problem solving I know in my job there's times when like they need an answer now, not like, wow, I'm really tired today. Can I get back to you on that?
Yeah, let me take a nap and then think on this. Like, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting stuff. So talk about, if you would, what led to you moving out of raw veganism, and because I know that we kind of both started doing this at about the same time too, and some of the issues you were having, and then you moved back into cooked vegan, yeah?
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, everything just compounded together. So the weight gain, like emotionally and mentally, just feeling like complete and utter crap. I'd started to do some blood work, and like my iron and my B12 were both super low.
Despite
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if I came into that diet with my iron and B12 already low, because I hadn't tested before that, but it was definitely an issue at that point.
Yeah.
And like these food cravings that just dominated my life. And I would be thinking about food all the time. And it was thinking about cooked food and all this other like crap that, I really didn't want to be eating, but I couldn't get it out of my head. And that's, everything together. It was just a sign to me that this was not working. None of it was working, and that I was in a place where it was time to make some changes. So for me, the logical step was just to go back to eating some cooked food, but keep it vegan.
Right. That's normally the step that people make. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to backtrack just for a second. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I one of the memories that I have that stand out in my mind so much about joining the 30 Bananas a Day community was a post that you put up where you...
I know the one you're referring to.
Yeah, I know. You ready for this? Can we talk about this?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. So you put up an article, and it was called Accepting Weight Gain on 811. And I believe it's probably about the time that you might have actually stepped on the scale and saw that you were 200 pounds, because in the article you talked about like getting rid of your scales and accepting the lifestyle and
going out and buying bigger jeans and a new belt because nothing I owned fit me at that point.
Yeah. And I remember Freele chiming in on the comment section. Oh, yes, that's the...
Good for you. You go, girl. Like,
yeah, you go. That's what you need to do. You need to follow this process through the end and let your metabolic blah, blah, blah heal. You are healing. You are healing.
And like, to be honest, I'm sure behind the scenes she was looking at these pictures of me that I had posted and probably like mocking me for how much weight I gained, because you look at the disparity between what she was presenting as the physical form that you will achieve as a woman on this diet, and then you looked at me where it was like I was huge, I was massive, I had so much body fat, and you just look at the two, and you would not look at those two and think that those two people are following the same lifestyle and the same diet. Like, right. No way in hell.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Deep disparity. Yeah.
And looking back at it now, for me, it was just a little bit of a minor red flag. But for me, coming in as a guy and seeing, the other guys there like Mike Arnstein and Tim Van Orden, just really ripped and lean. Somewhere in my mind, I probably thought, well, who knows, I don't understand what's going on there. But I remember seeing that and going, and then it just passed right over, and I kept moving right along, and just, you see that, and you don't think too much about it, but in retrospect, it's like, yeah, it was a little bit of a red flag, right?
For sure. And, for me, the red flag, too, was seeing that there were a lot of women who had the same complaint that I did. And this did seem to be a chiefly female problem.
Right.
Like, women would gain a lot of weight on this diet. Women would gain a lot of body fat. It was not muscle, it was body fat. Whereas men seemed to just get gaunt on this diet.
Right.
So it was very much a different experience depending on your gender. But again, like looking at this image that Freele presented, that you would eat however many bananas and dates a day, and then you would just have this beautiful bikini model body. But that was not what you were really seeing from what a lot of women were posting on the forums and what they were talking about.
So this is maybe something that I didn't pay as much attention to, just being me from my perspective. So I know there was a couple of people that had weight gain, but you would say that you talked to a lot of women and this was a very common issue.
So there were a couple who were posting pretty vocally on the forums about it, but behind the scenes, I ended up getting like a lot of messages from women who were experiencing the same thing. And so, after a certain point, I ended up sort of evaluating what Freele was saying about, like, you know, eventually you're going to see this weight fall off. And the reason I don't have any examples to point you to of women who have gained all this weight and then lost it is because people give up hope and they just fall off the diet. And no one has had the courage to see it through until that magical junction in time when the weight will fall off, right? And so that was her whole argument, that the reason I have no one to point you to as an example is because people just give up.
Wow.
And not that this obviously doesn't work and there is a pattern of it not working, but that nobody has just stuck it out for the long haul.
Wow.
And so as I started to sort of think a little more critically about that, it's just like, I can't ignore the fact that all these women are having the same experience, gaining all this weight, feeling crappier and crappier, and then, you
losing
know, just
fertility too, you know.
Yeah, that too, like losing periods, and this whole argument that was touted on the forums too, that, well, menstrual periods are just a way of getting rid of toxins.
Dirty
so
detoxins,
if you're no longer
meat
getting
eaters.
a period, you're pure. You're like, you're great. You're good. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I wasn't privy to some of those other conversations, but they're important to bring out. I think for sure. On the men's side, there was also some very interesting conversations on the backside as well about lack of morning wood, lack of ejaculate, lack of interest. And I distinctly recall this one guy who, really nice guy, so I'm just going to leave him out of this conversation, but he blatantly said, I have lost one, and this is a guy in his 20s, all right? Men in their 20s, this is, I tell
that
you,
shouldn't be happening.
This is not normal. He said, I have 100% lost all drive for sex, and he said, and I'm better for it. I feel so at peace and calm now, in
hindsight, it's really scary to hear that.
Right. It's like he was trying to feel like he was, ascending. He had reached ascension. He had surpassed the carnal cravings of lowly human animals. But
I remember this theory that, again, this like crazy batshit theory that it sounds nuts listening to it now, but at the time it made sense. This theory about how like sex drive in males, it's a sign that your body is decaying and dying and aging, and so your body has this physiological response to like spread your seed and procreate now with urgency before you're dead in the grave. And that was why we have sex drives. And so if you have no sex drive and you have no desire and no physical manifestation of that desire, it's a sign that your body is not aging and that it's pristine and in great condition. And people believe this.
Yeah, and you've detoxed. You've come out the other side. Yeah.
Detox.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It sounds so sad to like, we laugh at it now, but it sounds really like, it's just sad that back in the day, I remember hearing all these theories and all these explanations for things that were clearly physically not right and believing them at the time and putting a lot of stock in them.
Yeah, well, I think the thing that's interesting and relevant to bring up in this conversation is that even 10 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, the internet was still relatively in its early years, and the access to information that's available now wasn't there back then. Like, just even access to science papers, to, all of this type of information was still in a pretty restricted period of, human history, and now it's like everything's at your fingertips. Literally.
Well, even access to other people's stories and experiences, because at the time, the 30 Bad website was like the resource for information on this lifestyle. And if you dared say anything that flew in the face of what Freele and Durian Rider were promoting, you were banned and you were blocked. You were effectively silenced.
Yeah.
So the only information that you could find out there was information that supposedly corroborated all their, all their teachings, so to speak. So there was not a lot of information out there that would lead you to believe that this was not working for a large number of people, that most of the people who attempted this had distinct lack of success.
Yeah, 100%. And I recall, like, after I left the website, trying to contact all of these long-term, raw vegans on the side through other, emails and Facebook message, and trying to get some information about
Yeah.
what was going on. And the amount of stuff that came back was like,
Staggering.
yeah, equally like just a little off kilter. Like, serious iodine supplementing, which is one of the things that I was told I need to do, but like iodine supplementing can be dangerous. Like with any trace minerals, in concentration, it's very easy to go into too heavy doses, and then it becomes toxic.
And if your diet is optimal, you shouldn't be needing to supplement that anyways. Like there's just no reason that on a diet that gives you everything that your body needs, that you should be having to take various sublingual tablets, B12 injections, this and that. There's just no way.
Yeah. So when I started getting all of that information back, I was like, this is just a farce. It's an absolute farce. Like, what I said was, what did I get myself into?
I remember having the very same reaction. Like, I've been duped. And to some extent, I was like, well, I made the decision to go down this path, but I also felt like I was not presented the whole story. I was lied to, and I was sold this pretty package that just, when you unwrapped it, there was nothing good inside, really.
Right. So moving on to back into cooked veganism, because I thought, well, there's plenty of books out there. There's a pretty fair amount of research. There's doctors doing this. There's Dr. Campbell. There's Esselstyn. There's, the committee of whatever physicians and all of these people. So I kind of thought like, well, I'm going to move back into cooked veganism with a, full spectrum, plant-based diet. What could go wrong?
Again, that'll correct everything.
Right. Yeah. You did it. So I did it wrong a couple of times. Now I'm trying to do it right. I move into the whole foods plant-based diet, ate my daily dozen, right? Gregor's daily dozen, and moved on from there. Failed equally at that, although that was a little slower fail, little slower, more torturous demise in some regards.
Yeah.
And you did as well.
Yeah. And, I remember starting to feel better by adding in like grains and cooked veggies and beans and that sort of stuff. And then I remember like after a certain point too being like, well, I feel better now. Maybe I just wasn't doing raw right. So I would go back to it and I would try it for, 2-3 months at a time, and I would have the exact same results, just feeling like crap. So I would yo-yo back and forth between raw veganism, high carb, low fat, and cooked veganism. And it just seemed like I was just spiraling and nothing was really getting better. It was, it was a flip-flop between like bad and worse pretty much. Like I just wasn't feeling optimal, just things were not working. Clearly things were not working.
And I remember your races too, because you kind of tapered off in racing.
Yeah. I felt like my life was just in the toilet, and I just felt like with the iron, especially, it was getting worse and worse. And I remember, with these ultras and training for it, where I'd be trying to haul my butt up the side of a mountain and just feeling like my heart was going to explode, and just feeling fatigued, and again having no energy to perform at work or anything in that capacity, and just feeling like I am just wiped out and just nothing is working, and I need to fix this. I need to fix my health.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. It's like, you hit a wall where you're like,
I can't do this anymore.
You're really close to downward spiraling into severe health issues. So you had some real challenges with iron, and I know that we talked about this as well, that it's very easy for iron to get low, and that we would both have issues with, kind of phasing out. Like if you stood up, you would start to black out, or just getting really dizzy during exercise. whatever it was, going up a mountain. And for me, like I had moved from running into I wanted to be that guy who was like the vegan strength guy, right? Like that
Yeah.
was I was there. I wanted to be the spokesperson, you know. I was sold on it. But the thing that I would never tell people is like how almost dangerous it was for me in the gym, because I would try to be doing these like squats and all of a sudden just like
Tunnel
just
vision
get,
and
yeah, tunnel vision and really lightheaded and, you know, spinning. And I dropped a couple of like fairly heavy lifts because I just couldn't do it. And it wasn't that I was lifting more than I should. It was just that day I couldn't, like, it was just, and I lift now, I never have that problem. Never.
yeah,
Like my
yeah.
lifting now is 100% different, but that's a whole other story. I think iron or just oxygen delivery in general for a lot of vegan athletes can be really challenging. Um, so do you want to talk a little bit about the struggles you had with iron and like what happened when you went through the cooked foods and then so on?
Yeah, so, as I started trying to pay attention to what was going on, what was precipitating all this, of course, the first thing was making dietary changes. So, eating more plant-based sources of iron. And, as a lot of people know, plant-based sources are not as easily absorbed by the body. So, you're not absorbing it. It doesn't matter how many lentils you are eating, like your iron's just not going to come up. And then, being told, well, take vitamin C with your sources of iron, and cut out caffeine because that interferes with absorption. And take, don't take calcium with it because that'll interfere as well. And oh, it's probably your B12. Your B12 is low, so that's why you're not absorbing iron. So doing B12 injections and all of this, and then moving on to actual supplementation instead of trying to just get it from my diet, like changing up my supplementation. Taking forms of it that were supposed to be more, I don't know, more readily available or readily absorbed. And just, I'd be able to get my iron up like a touch here and there, but it just wasn't having a lot of success. And it seemed like the minute I stopped being super, super diligent and doing everything to a T, my iron would just plummet again. So it was always like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I wasn't really able to resolve the problem by making all these corrections while staying on a plant-based diet.
Weren't you at some point, if I recall from a conversation we had, just taking like a really expensive pharmaceutical grade
Yeah.
supplementation that was very expensive, right? Like,
Yeah. And it seemed to pass right through me. I just did not absorb any of it. And I remember my doctor just being like, this is what you should be taking. And, be very diligent about taking your doses on an empty stomach and having vitamin C with them, avoiding caffeine, blah, 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 blah. And I did everything to a T the way I was told to do it. And just like minimal to no response in terms of my ferritin going up.
Yeah.
Which was disheartening and just so frustrating to be doing everything the way I was told to do it and not really seeing much of a response.
Yeah. And didn't you have another ultra friend who had similar issues? She had become a vegan as well around the same time, and she was a very talented runner. Am I recalling this? Yeah.
Yeah. And, she was going through the same struggles, and it was like hugely impacting her running. And eventually, after going through different doctors and nutritionists and that, she just gave up the idea of being vegan. She went back to eating red meat, and that has worked for her. And she has never looked back, basically.
And she's back to being successful with racing. Yeah. But she, as I recall, she went from being like really top tier to just kind of plummeting down. Yeah.
Oh, totally. To being like quite competitive, to being pretty much like back of the pack, or just not even being able to do the distances that she wanted to do because her body just could not respond to that demand. Like she would get up and try and run, and she was just like, man, like I'm just bagged. I can't even get out and do 10 miles, let alone thinking about running like a 50-mile race or something like that.
Yeah, crazy. Interesting stuff. So you followed the doctor's advice. You went to the doctor. You did the diet right, and still problems.
still nothing like, it was like feeling better than I'd felt on the raw diet, but at the same time, it was still this just feeling of like something is not right, and I shouldn't be a young, like otherwise healthy person who's feeling this crappy and this fatigued.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's and this is getting off on a tangent, but I think it's an interesting idea. I suspect that there's, and I haven't done a bunch of research in it, but I suspect that there's probably some genotype differences with people's heme receptors where genetically some people just aren't have the receptors that receive plant heme well. And yeah, that's just a bit of a genetic variation amongst humans. Where's your family lineage from?
So predominantly from Europe, like around Germany and that sort of thing, Germany and Britain. So
Interesting.
I come from a long line of meat eaters, not a long line of plant-based people.
Northern Europeans. Okay,
Yeah.
well, we move on from that. So, how about your journey into eating animal products again? Because I know that, like me, and this is kind of, some people go straight into carnivorism now, which is interesting, like this whole new fad, or go straight into keto. But for me, when I moved in, I was really like, well, I'm only going to use animal products as supplements. They're going to be my supplements, and I'll just eat enough animal products to be healthy, but other than that, I'll be plant-based. Because I really wanted to keep with that. And now it's a different story, but that was my transition in, right?
Yeah, and that was kind of a similar thing for me. Like, I was not jazzed about going back to eating eggs and meat and dairy. Like, I remember the first time eating meat again and having some chicken and sitting there and crying because I just did not want to do it. And everything in my body was saying to me that this is not what I should be having to do. And there was this big sort of, disparity between what my body needed and what my head was telling me it wanted to do. But I started feeling better as I started eating meat and eggs and that sort of thing in particular. I wasn't really eating dairy at that point. I still could not seem to digest dairy. Like, it just did not work for me.
Yeah.
And we can go back to that later because that has changed hugely. But yeah, getting some meat and eggs in particular back into my diet, like I just started feeling just better, like more energy, and just didn't just feel down and depressed all the time. And it was just, it was kind of a game changer. And it was like, man, like, what have I been missing out on all these years? What have I been subjecting myself to? And if I had known that I could start to feel better and I could start to feel good like this, like, I would have just done it so much earlier.
Yeah. So you started with some chicken and eggs.
Yeah.
And when did you move into red meat? I mean, did you do that for iron or?
Yeah, like it was mainly for iron and for B12 as well. And, I think it was probably like a month or two of eating like chicken and some eggs and then slowly moving back into red meat and that sort of thing. I never did end up incorporating like seafood or anything, just out of preference. It's not something I enjoy, but yeah, I started adding the red meat back in, and that made a big difference right away. Like, it's funny because that ultra running friend of mine who we were just speaking of, when she saw me again after I'd started eating red meat, she was like, "Oh my God, like there's color in your face now." She was like, "It's just like night and day. Like, you look like you are alive and healthy and hearty." And, so I was really, I guess when you look in the mirror every day and you don't see that sudden change that is so drastic to other people who haven't seen you for a long time, it's hard to kind of get a sense of the significance of it. But yeah, she was super surprised, and she was like, "Whatever you're doing now, keep doing it because it's obviously working."
Right. Yeah, and so you just eat kind of, what's your diet look like now? So you went from chicken and eggs to moving into red meat and started noticing some, uptick in your health. Then what?
So, for the longest time, it was like, I'd have, maybe like meat and eggs a few times a week or something like that. And then I was still eating probably pretty heavy carbs, like eating a lot of quinoa, a lot of rice, a lot of, starchy veggies and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, it seemed to be working for me. But the thing was, like, while I did lose some of the weight that I'd gained when I went raw, I was never what you would call lean by any standard, which most people, they think of an endurance athlete, an ultra runner, and they think of somebody who has relatively low body fat.
Mm-hmm.
That never really happened for me.
Yeah.
And I was always a little mystified as to why I could not achieve low body fat percentage while I was doing a ton of endurance activities and eating what was a pretty clean diet. Like, I wasn't eating sugar and all these junk foods and stuff like that, but I was still eating pretty high carb.
Yeah.
So this all kind of changed when I decided to try out keto. And, I noticed a pretty big change right away in terms of body fat and, with what most people would experience about dropping this fat pretty much effortlessly. And I noticed I was putting on muscle mass a lot more easily. And I don't know, like I've been playing around with keto now for probably about 3 months, and it seems to just be the thing that is working for me. And at this point, I can eat dairy with no problems. I never was able to consume dairy before, and now I can eat it with no issue, which was surprising to me. For years, I thought I'm just lactose intolerant. Dairy is not something that I can eat.
Yeah.
And now it's just no problem.
I had a similar thing too. I even recall saying that the inflammation in my body that I was experiencing years ago was from the heavy dairy I was eating, from like whey powders and all this kind of stuff. And I eat a lot of dairy now. I eat very specific types of dairy, but I eat a lot of dairy. I don't have inflammation, and I'm 10 years older now. So that's all very interesting, but I keep my sugar intake pretty low, my carbs. I'm not no carb or low carb. I kind of cycle with my training depending on where I feel like I need to be, whether I want to put on mass or drop mass, or whether I'm just like trying to volumize water in my body for performance, because that's something that I will do right before I go into a meet. But I manipulate, so now I'm like playing the game of manipulating macros, but my daily diet is very much keto and really heavy on the side of like carnivore. Not entirely carnivore. I don't think that, fiber is bad for you. I don't think fruits are bad for you. It's just that I'm eating what I crave, and what I crave every day is like a little bit of fruit, like an apple or some berries or some fruit that I grow here, a huge amount of meat, and normally a small amount of like heavily stewed vegetables, or even, maybe something from the garden, but that's it. And then like my second meal of the day is often eggs, because I crave eggs all of the time. And that's actually
eggs on a daily basis, and it works. It just works.
And that's actually how I broke veganism, because that was the first thing that I craved. And I feel like those yolks that have all of the preformed fat soluble vitamins and the long chain fatty acids and the cholesterol, all of that stuff that you get deficient in, is there in that one neat package, And I mean, I probably eat 2 dozen eggs a week, and I feel awesome on eggs.
Yeah, and I feel like the proof is really in the pudding there. It's about how you feel, right? And like for me, a big part of trying out keto was not just for performance, which like I can talk about now how drastically different running an ultra is when you are burning fat and you're not bonking.
Right.
But like just dealing with food cravings, because I felt like even though I was still eating pretty healthy, like these sugar cravings would just not go away. And I felt like sugar was one of those things where if I had it in the house, like I would just go nuts on it, and I would eat a bag of cookies, and I could not keep this junk food in the house. Whereas I was astounded to find that like when I went keto, I could have a plate of donuts and junk and whatever in front of me, and I have like no urge to touch it.
Yeah.
Which for me was like a revelation, like me with my sweet tooth and my, just super cravings for this junk food, to have it there and just to have no desire to eat it was a proof that this is something that is working for me. And feeling good, having the mental clarity, watching my athletic performance come back, watching my body fat go way down.
Yeah.
Like I never thought I would see the day that I have abs, and yet that day has come.
Boom. Yeah. And so where are you weighing in now?
So I'm about 150 now.
Yeah. So
which like for me, I feel like I could be maybe a touch leaner than that, but this seems to be where I can stay without a ton of effort.
yeah, and
Like
yeah,
it
you
seems
want
to
to
be my set point. So
settle into where's a nice place for your body and not constantly manipulating that.
totally.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like, how I look now at 150 versus how I looked at 150 before, drastically different body composition.
Right,
Like
right. You've
night
gotten a
and
lot more
day.
muscular. That's something I've noticed, that you're just, super
Yeah.
toned and muscular. Yeah, and
Yeah.
lean. And
Yeah.
so how's your recovery?
So this is super interesting to me. After recently having run my first 50K while I was keto, first of all, having no bonking, no low energy, no low mood, which for me, I've always associated running an ultra with like, you're going to have these low points where you just feel like crap and you have no energy and all you have to do is like eat more carbs. So not having that experience and then the recovery, like, feeling like I didn't have to eat right afterwards. I remember about 3 hours after I finished the race, eating a steak and some asparagus. And that was my recovery meal. Woke up the next day and just felt absolutely fine. Like none of that feeling of just inflammation in my joints and my muscles that I used to have from eating, really carb heavy foods while I was training and while I was running. Like everything just felt good and it was working and I was walking around and I can go for a run the next day. And it was just like, yeah, it was really night and day. And it was quite illuminating actually to see that was possible.
How did you fuel during the 50K?
So I was eating a lot of like nut butters and I was taking in like a little bit of carbs, but it wasn't like, like eating the M&Ms and the chips and downing the Coke and the cookies and all the stuff that you would normally have in an ultra.
Yeah.
And I found that I was also eating like way less during it than I normally would be and maintaining still very high energy. So
did you have goo shots of any kind?
So I cut those out years ago because I just found that stuff was just like poison. It was just not working for me. It was destroying my teeth. It was destroying my skin. Like I would have this experience where I would run an ultra and then like the next day, if I'd been fueling with goos and gels and all that, like my skin would just break out. Like it would look like I was having an allergic reaction.
Interesting.
And when I cut all that crap out, like my skin would just be completely clear after running an ultra. So that was kind of a sign to me that maybe sugar and all these super carb heavy foods is not something that my body likes to be fueling with.
Yeah. Really interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
That's got me considering some stuff. So for me, like when I go to a powerlifting meet, this last year I basically have been having like, I'll take 2 sweet potatoes with me.
Okay.
And all I do is like after squats I eat a sweet potato, and then after bench I'll eat a sweet potato.
Mm-hmm.
Just so I can make that ATP, but I haven't ever tried doing it without just being purely in ketosis during the meet. So that'd be interesting.
But I think there's definitely a big difference between getting some carbs from like sweet potatoes versus just having this like man-made potion that is just simple sugars. Like they're not even in the same food group at all. It's completely different. Whereas I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with like having some starchy veggies, stuff that you're getting some nutrition from.
Sure.
But when you're just relying on this gross processed sugar, I mean, I don't think that's the way to go. And I've come around very clearly in my mind that is not the way to go. And it does not lead to me having a great race. It does not lead to me having a great recovery. It destroys my stomach during an event. So
Yeah, I had a lot of like towards the end of my ultra marathoning, and I really thought that like I kind of got to this mindset where I was like, I'm getting too old and I feel like this is just putting too much on my body.
Yeah.
Like this level of exercise, and I've never run since I quit veganism, so now I'm kind of like, maybe I need to go back and take a few jogs and see where I'm at with that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. For me, it was very much like, yeah, I've got to get my health back in order, stop running ultras. And I took quite a bit of time off from that.
yeah,
But as I found that, like, my fitness started to come up from boxing and my health was kind of back in order, I naturally kind of just gravitated back to the trail running as something like more for my mental health than everything, because it's
sure.
just such a positive, peaceful place to be running through the forest by yourself.
Yeah.
And then, as I saw that my recovery was really good and I was performing better than I had when I was logging really long miles, previously training for ultras, I was like, no, I kind of want to give this a go again and see what I can do with it. And it's just
Sure.
been, yeah, it's been great. I mean, I don't know that I'll ever run another 100-miler, but so far what I'm doing, it's going good.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Yeah.
really great to hear. Yeah, I would have like at the end of ultra marathoning time that I would have like just really horrible crashes. Like you were saying, I would just crash so hard,
Yeah.
and I never get that now at all. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I mean, that's something I think that people who have been on really high carb diets can relate to, is
Yeah.
the ups and downs
Yeah.
of sugars, and even when it is like heavy starches. So at the end of my veganism, I had been like relatively lean on raw veganism,
Mhm.
not as lean as and gaunt as some of the guys get. But when I switched to high starch, cooked foods, whole foods veganism, that's
Yeah.
when I really started packing on the weight. And and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
starches for me are the death. Like even now, like I, like I was saying, I kind of manipulate my macros a bit, but if I go for any period where I keep my starches high, that weight is coming on. What I
Oh,
call my winter coat is coming.
absolutely. I feel very much the same way, that it's like I've had, brief little bouts here and there where I'll eat a little bit more carbs and it's just like the cravings come back. I start feeling like super bloated and gross again, like I'm not digesting it well. And fat comes on pretty effortlessly if I'm eating like that. And it just like I can tell that it's not the optimal thing for my body. It's, all signs are pointing to don't do this pretty much.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing too to see where, like, I was reading some stuff about Irish farmers because I was kind of curious, historically, and I read this thing where, like, it said at one point they did some calculations, and like an average farmer would eat 8,000 calories in potatoes a day.
A lot of carbs.
That's a lot of carbs, but these are people who are working manual
Active
labor.
all day
Manual
long.
labor from before dawn, 4 in the morning, till night. You're talking
Yeah.
12 to 14 hours of manual labor. And I think that that's something that we're not even close to anymore. Like most of us,
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, like, and speaking to that, like, I do believe in fueling your body for the activity that it is going to be doing.
right?
So doing high intensity stuff, like for the boxing, for example, like I tend to put my carbs for the day right before I box, because I've tried boxing while I'm in ketosis or when I'm not fueled up with at least a little bit of carbs, and it does not work. I do not have the same performance that I do when I'm having a little bit of carbs right before I train. So, if you're doing, super intensive activity or something that requires like, high, high exertion level or a lot of muscular performance, like I do agree that carbs are probably going to help you perform a little bit better.
Yeah, I think
But
it
if you're
brings up
somebody
your
who's largely sedentary or you're doing just low intensity stuff, like you don't need carbs for that.
no, not at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, okay, I'm looking at my battery. I'm at 13%, so I might
Yeah.
die.
Yeah, no, this has been really great. So we can just kind of wrap this up here. But
Yeah.
where do you see your future rolling? Your health is back.
Yeah. So, like, it's the one thing I'll say, it's been interesting. As I have started to run ultras again, I am having iron problems again. So as I'd mentioned to you, like I did get an iron infusion today, and we'll kind of see where that goes. But yeah, keeping up with my iron testing on a monthly basis, I have noticed that it has come back down now as I'm logging the higher mileage. So I don't know, maybe that's something that my body's not going to let me continue to do on a regular basis. But I think the key being like cross training, not putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, with sports, just staying active in a wide variety of sports. Like it's.
Yeah, how long has it been now for post-veganism for you? 3 years?
Oh God.
2.5?
No, it's got to be more than that. It's got to be closer to like 4 or 5 years, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think you quit a little earlier than I did. Yeah, because I just hit my 3rd year, but I think you were kind of back and forth for a little bit.
I was, so that's the thing. It was sort of, yeah, you know, hoping that maybe I'll go back and do it right this time and then it'll work. And then finally just being like, no, this is not working for me. Time to move forward and start with a clean slate and go from there. And I mean, at this point, I don't really ever see myself making another stab at raw veganism or cooked food vegan lifestyle. Like it's just not gonna happen.
Yeah, and so do you have anything to say for somebody who's considering about experimenting with plant-based for either health or for athletic performance? And we haven't really talked about the ethics today, and I think there's a lot of people who are starting to say now, well, veganism is never about health, it's about ethics. And for me, to that I say, like, if veganism is only about ethics, then that needs to be what the vegan community sells. This is a diet purely for ethics, purely for some sort of protest, purely for morals, and this.
Don't preach health. Don't preach improved recovery. Don't preach heightened athletic performance. If it's about ethics, then keep it about ethics, right?
Yeah.
I guess like my advice would be, if you're going into it, think critically about what you're doing and the results that you're seeing. Don't commit yourself to a result or an outcome before you've actually seen the results and the outcome.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of the perhaps one of the many things that several of us did wrong was thinking, okay, this diet is going to work, and so I'm going to ignore all the red flags along the way because I'm already committed to making it work. Just pay attention to the science, and you'll know within yourself, you'll know how your body is feeling, if it's working or not. Pay attention to your body. Your body will tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just in wrapping this up, can you give us your 5 big red flags over your journey?
Losing your menstrual period,
big
hair loss, brain fog, increased body fat. Those are 4. And I think the 5th one would be, dental health. That's a big one. I don't think we got it too much into that, but dental health for sure.
Yeah. Well, I've said enough about that, so we can just understand that dental health can be a real challenge on a vegan diet as well.
If your teeth are rotting out of your head, that's probably not a good sign.
Yeah. I'm so happy to see you, just thriving and doing well. And
likewise.
Yeah, following your journey's been really great, and I'm excited to see where your ultra marathoning pulls you back into, and you've almost got me a little intrigued on that, but I've been doing so well with powerlifting right now, I don't want to counter my progress there too much, so thanks for chatting, and it's been really nice to talk to you again.
And to kind of recap our journeys and our missteps and the path going forward.
Absolutely. Hey, best wishes to you.
Yeah.
We'll chat soon.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, bye.